dilated. Yeah. Worldwide.
Welcome to the 10th episode of the MMA Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got a pretty exciting episode. We have Jon Anik. We're going to be calling him up in about 30 minutes, asking him what it's been like in his first year with the UFC, commentating fights. We also got a bunch of stuff to bring you. We had a thriller of a lightweight champion last Saturday at UFC 150. We want to break down that card. We got a card this Saturday, Strikeforce, Ronda Rousey taking on Sarah Kaufman, and a slew of MMA news to bring you. Mayhem Miller arrested in a church, found buck naked. We got Chael Sonnen moving up to light heavyweight, talking shit with Jon Jones already. So much to bring you. So without further ado, let's do it. And thank you for tuning in to our 10th episode here on August 15th. Big thanks also to Robert Drysdale, legendary American grappler. Tried to have him on last week. We hope to get him on this week. And Jon Anik, we're definitely having on. We're going to call him in about 30 minutes. Also, shout out to our partners, MMAmental.com. Check out Ray and Jay. MMAplayground.com as well. Great forum. If you enjoy fantasy MMA, putting in your picks and competing against other people, the MMA Playground is the best place to do that. And it's got the best MMA forum on the internet too. Definitely join the conversation. We'd like you to tweet us at the MMA Podcast if you'd like to be part of the conversation, or you can just call in directly. We love taking callers, talking MMA with anybody who wants to talk, and our number for that is 646-378-1046. That's 646-378-1046, and obviously visit us at themmapodcast.com. What's up, Chris?
Hey yo, buddy!
Hey, man, it's been a crazy week in MMA. You know, the last few weeks were a little bit slow. There wasn't too much coming out, but Jesus Christ, the last week there has been so much to talk about in the sport. And I guess we'll lead it off with UFC 150.
That shit cray, man, but before we do that, I just want to say we're in our double dig. We're now episode 10.
Double dig. We're in our 10th episode. We have almost 20 hours of material, so if you want to turn off your brain and get dumber, definitely do that now.
Listen to us laugh at each other's jokes and talk about MMA.
Talk about MMA and poop, mainly.
Ronda Rousey's poop, to be specific.
Be absolutely specific. And if we ever have her on, we hope she never listens to any other episodes of this.
I won't bring it up. I know I won't.
Yeah, I've had a pretty crazy week myself. I'm moving up to Chicago in about 5 days. Actually, we're not going to be having a podcast next week. We'll obviously put that up on the website. But I'm arriving in Chicago on Tuesday night. So doing a Wednesday podcast is a little bit of a stretch, so we won't be broadcasting next week on the 22nd, but we'll be back the 29th to preview UFC 151, which is going to be the following weekend. Henderson and Jones, they've been talking a lot this week. It's been a little bit quiet. They've showed each other a lot of respect, but this past week they started talking a lot. Jones called Henderson a one-trick pony. Henderson said, if I'm a one-trick pony, it's a pretty good trick. And, of course, Chael Sonnen had to start a little Twitter beef as well.
I'm glad they're doing it, man. It's nice to see guys respect each other every now and then, but, I mean, you got to sell a fight, dude. And it's not like there's anything personal on the line, but talk a little shit, man.
You got plenty of time after the fight to respect each other, train with each other, do all that. But before the fight, you know, it's not time to try and make friends, especially, like you said, if you want to sell the fight. The people who are the best at selling fights are these quote-unquote bad guys like Josh Koscheck and Chael Sonnen.
The Diaz brothers, you can't forget them.
Diaz brothers, I was actually going to mention them, but yeah, definite great shit talkers, and actually, it was my birthday yesterday. Had a pretty fun time doing that.
Happy birthday, you old piece of shit.
Turned 48 yesterday. No, I turned 23. Yeah, I had a pretty fun time. I actually was in Tampa Bay with family, so I got a chance to have a low-key birthday. I think my last 5 or 6 birthdays all resulted in me getting blackout wasted and waking up the next morning feeling like absolute dog shit. So it was nice to hang out with family, and I still definitely got a little drunk, but it wasn't, it wasn't blackout drunk, luckily.
It's not a Jake Walters' birthday without getting a very aggressive hand job, getting Irishman wasted, and then waking up next to a dumpster behind a P.F. Chang's.
Luckily, I got Irishman wasted and not Scotsman wasted, because nobody likes when the Scotsman.
I've felt the brunt of that. I don't like it.
Chris does not like the Scotsman. But yeah, UFC 150. I don't want to talk too much about my severe alcoholism, but no, that was an awesome card. It started off. I'll do a quick rundown of the cards. Before the main card, you had Nick Lentz defeat Chris with the pronunciation, the Japanese fighter. I really don't.
Is it on the run sheet? Because otherwise I don't know.
Mitsuoka, I don't know
how
to pronounce his name.
It's just the Asian guy. We could just leave it at that.
Nick Lentz defeats the Asian guy by TKO in the first round, about 3.5 minutes in. Chico Camus beats Dustin Peg by unanimous decision. Eric Perez defeats Ken Stone very early. At first, I thought that was a quick stoppage. But when you watched it again in slow motion, Herb Dean was definitely made the right call there to pull Perez off of Stone 17 seconds in.
I think that guy needs to figure out a new profession, because if you look at his losses under the Zuffa banner, he got completely just manhandled by Eddie Wineland, got KO'd by a slam. Scott Jorgensen knocked him out in full guard, with full guard ground and pound, knocked his ass out. And now this one, I think it's time to figure out something else, because he just can't take the shots, man. Nothing personal, but damn.
He did beat Dustin Peg in his last fight in June by split decision, but yeah, it's never a good sign for a guy's chin when he gets put out 17 seconds in. The reason I thought it was a quick stoppage first is because when Herb Dean leapt in, Perez himself kind of leapt backwards, which gave Stone the opportunity, and he very quickly jumped up, and it looked like he wasn't that hurt. But you saw when Dean stopped the fight, Stone was not intelligently defending himself. He was getting pummeled by the Mexican Eric Perez, and that sounds racist, but I looked it up, and that is the politically correct way to address somebody from Mexico.
You call me a German bastard, I'm not going to do that.
That's very true. If you call me an Irish bastard, I'd probably take it as a compliment. Michael Kuiper defeats Jared Hammond, second round TKO. That was a pretty exciting fight. And you have the alpha male featherweight Dennis Bermudez beating Tommy Hayden. That was a really great submission, standing guillotine. That was actually my call for the main card, Benson Henderson, Frankie Edgar, which ended up going to a razor-thin split decision. And at the bottom of the main card, we had Max Holloway defeating Justin Lawrence by TKO in the second round. A knee and some heavy punches toward the body to finish that one out. So to get on to the main 4 fights, we had Yushin Okami, who was originally supposed to fight Husamir Palhares. Palhares suffered a knee injury and was replaced at the last minute against Buddy Roberts. No one really gave Buddy Roberts a chance, and it didn't look like he had much of a chance in the fight. Yushin Okami just dominates him and gets the second round TKO.
This was something that we all saw coming, a step up for Buddy, and just an obvious mismatch from the get-go. Buddy, I look like I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. Roberts didn't belong to be, you didn't belong in the ring with Yushin. Yushin proved that. The only chance I gave Buddy was the fact that he was a former college football player, which, obviously he's going to be explosive. He did not look like he wanted to be in there with Yushin, and it ended just like we all thought it would.
Yep, and Okami dominates, and unfortunately for Okami, I don't know if this is really going to help his status that much in the UFC middleweight division, because he was already so high. He was much higher ranked than Buddy Roberts beforehand, so it really doesn't help either fighter too much. But yeah, Yushin Okami, definitely, I would say he's a top 20 middleweight. You know, it's a very crowded line now with Bisping, Stan. You have guys like Rich Franklin, Lombard, Belcher, Tim Boach, Belfort, Weidman, just a bunch of middleweights. So I don't know if I would give him top 10 status, but definitely slowly working his way back up.
Yeah, he's fringe for sure. I'd put him at, somewhere right around 10, probably 11 or 12. But I think to get anywhere near that title, again, he needs to put on impressive performances. He can't put on the kind of performances that he was putting on in the first place, which took him so long to get a title shot. I mean, blasting out nobodies and decisioning guys he should have finished, won't get the job done. So he's really got to put some work in.
Mm-hmm. And as much as a mismatch as that was, and how predictable it ended up being, it was a much, much more entertaining fight than the other middleweight fight on the main card, Jake Shields versus Ed Herman. I have a new nickname for Jake Shields, the Intermission.
I like that, because every time the guy fights, I find myself looking away. If it's not over in the first round, I look away until the decision is announced, because I know exactly how that's going to go.
It worked out really well. I wanted to take a shower before the fight started, but things got a little complicated checking into the hotel. I had to go run around somewhere else for a minute, so I got there right as the fight started. And halfway into the first round, I realized that Shields Herman was an excellent opportunity to take that shower that I wanted to take before the fight. And as I was stepping out, they were announcing it 30-27 in favor of Jake Shields. I don't want to take too much credit away from him, because he definitely did dominate Ed Short Fuse Herman. And Herman's, not a slouch. He just came off 3 wins. Against Tim Crater, Kyle Noak, and Clifford Starks. But just not very impressive by Herman, letting himself get completely dominated 30-27. And Shields didn't look like he was trying to finish the fight. It really looked like he was trying to bring it on to where the judges would give him the decision.
I don't care if someone's dominating, man, because if you're not trying to damage them, what's the point? Why are you in the sport? You're trying to win, yeah, and I get it. You're an athlete and all that crap, but people are trying to watch a fight, and when Jake Shields gets in there, he doesn't fight. He just drags someone down, hits him with little rabbit punches that changes positions. I'm sick of seeing that guy fight, to be honest.
Yeah, and it kind of brings up a question, because he's definitely got a impressive record at middleweight. He just beat Ed Herman and Yoshihiro Akiyama. Before that, he lost to Jake Ellenberger in GSP, though. Kind of makes you wonder where Jake Shields is at the middleweight division. Looking on Fight Matrix now, and they have him ranked 7th. I don't know if I agree.
What?
Yeah, they've got him 7th. The top 10 of the middleweights on Fight Matrix, you have Silva, Sonnen. I guess they have Sonnen still at middleweight because he hasn't fought at 205 yet. They have Silva, Sonnen, Weidman, Rockhold, Belfort, Boach, Shields, Belcher, Lombard, Franklin, rounding out the top 10.
Yeah, I want to see him against Paul Juarez in the next fight. I think that makes the most sense. Paul Juarez is supposed to fight Okami. Roberts filled in for him, and I know he's on a win now. 2 wins, but one was at welterweight against a guy who was making his welterweight debut, and the other one was an uninspiring performance. Let's see how good his jiu-jitsu really is when he gets in there with Paul Juarez.
Definitely. Another fight I would love seeing, if Roger Gracie came over from Strikeforce at any point, that would be an excellent fight, Jake Shields versus Roger Gracie, a guy in Gracie who truly can keep up with the jiu-jitsu that Shields puts out there.
Let me ask you something.
What's that?
In a fight between Roger Gracie and Jake Shields, is there a guy named Jake Shields in that fight?
I don't understand what you're asking right now.
Basically, my point is, if Jake Shields is going up against anyone, I am going to look away, and that's my point. I don't think it would be an excellent fight at all at this point until he puts any kind of pressure on his opponent and tries to finish. I don't want to watch the guy fight.
Yeah, Herman is a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner, but Shields just has that next level stuff. He's very, very skilled on the ground, and seeing him take on a guy like Roger Gracie or another Strikeforce guy and Ronaldo Souza, I think seeing him fight someone who really can keep up with him on the ground would finally make for an interesting Jake Shields fight. But until that point, I'm in the same boat as you, and I will continue to take breaks from the fight when he comes on the screen, unfortunately. Jacare, yeah, he and Gracie probably are the biggest threats to him on the ground, other than obviously Anderson Silva and Huzamir Palhares. Yep. And if Damian Maia hadn't have dropped down, his jiu-jitsu is kind of a question, I guess. But hey, that would also probably make a pretty good fight.
Yeah, even a Okami Shields rematch would be great, because Okami, when they fought, it was at 176, I believe, and that's just not an optimal weight for Yushin. He's put on a lot of mass since then. I'd give Okami a hell of a chance at beating the crap out of Yushin.
That was the Rumble on the Rock where he beat Okami and Condit in the same night, and of course he won them both by decision.
Yep. Oh, would you look at that? What a surprise.
And for how boring Jake Shields' Ed Herman was, Donald Cerrone and Melvin Gillard fucking brought down the house.
Yes, man. That couldn't have gone any better. We were talking about it while watching it, and it was very Paul Daly, Nick Diaz-esque with the amount of action they packed into less than a round. I mean, just about 1 minute. Cerrone finished the fight a minute 16 in, which kind of makes you think like he dominated the fight. But about 30, 40 seconds in, it was looking like Melvin Gillard had that fight wrapped up. Donald Cerrone was on Queer Street after Gillard just shot in some amazing hooks. Cerrone was on roller skates for a second there, obviously was very dazed, was not together. Caught himself and just delivered this amazing head kick, followed it up with a punch that sent Gillard down, and had the referee dive in and save Gillard a minute 16 in. Yeah, what a surprise. Melvin Gillard choked in a big fight. That's incredible. Never would have guessed.
He came so close to finishing Cerrone. I don't know if I want to take that much away from him. If he maybe would have landed one more hook, that fight would have been over.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Cerrone rushes in and wins actually KO of the night and fight of the night. Both of them were awarded $60,000. Cerrone an extra $60,000, and it was a fight where Melvin Gillard actually didn't make weight. Cerrone wasn't too angered by it. Actually said it was totally fine. They've been friends before the fight, so obviously there wasn't any bad blood there to start off with. But Gillard misses weight by I think 1.5 pounds, which it's not like an Anthony Johnson missing weight by 7 or 8 pounds. It was still pretty close.
I've got a 2-part question for you. Number one, do you think that Melvin Gillard has the best Muay Thai in the lightweight division?
I think he has the strongest punches. I was gonna say the best boxing, but guys like Frankie Edgar, who move around with those flurries of punches, obviously are a little bit better boxers in my opinion than a guy like Gillard. I think he has the hardest punches, but I don't know if I'd say he has the best Muay Thai.
I disagree, and here's why. I think he has the most technically sound Muay Thai in the division. Maybe not the most crushing, but the way that he mixes things up, his technique with his kicks is the best. I think he is by far the best kicker in the division. The only guy that comes close, I think, as far as fundamentally sound Muay Thai is Edson Barbosa, but I don't think that his punches are the strongest. In fact, I'd have to say that Jeremy Stevens and Melvin Gillard and BJ Penn probably have the strongest punching in the division. But when I watch Donald do his thing, to me it's just magical. It's just he's one of my favorite fighters. But
Donald Cerrone truly has no weaknesses.
Yeah, well, his wrestling used to be his weakness, and then he shored that up. His defensive wrestling is great now. second part to my question is, now that he's facing off with Pettis, how do you see that fight going down?
Pettis is a guy like a Cerrone or a Henderson who's very, very all around, very well-rounded, has a good ground game and a good stand-up game. Pettis actually was the only man to defeat Benson Henderson in the last few years, but when it comes down to it, I think Cerrone is getting better every fight, even though he had that really kind of enigma of a fight where he was completely manhandled by Nate Diaz. I see Cerrone winning that, A, because he's a bigger man than Pettis, and B, because I think both standing up and on the ground, he's just a smidge better.
Little smidgeroony?
Little smidgeroon. Yeah, I was actually listening to the Rogan podcast recently, and he made an excellent point about Donald Cerrone. A lot of guys can't throw these crazy head kicks like the kick that Cerrone threw to knock out Melvin Gillard, and that's because if their kick gets caught, then they can't fight off their back, so it's too much of a risk. But guys like Cerrone can throw these wild head kicks because they know even if you catch the kick and you put me on my back, I'm still going to be attacking. I'm still going to be dangerous, and it's such a great skill to be able to fight off your back. And it was so cool. We had Eddie Bravo on a few weeks ago to talk about that and go into a little further detail.
Yeah, and going back to Donald's kicks, his leg kicks are probably his most impressive, but that kick that he caught Melvin with, the weird thing about it is that didn't even catch him flush. That didn't catch him in the temple or on the jaw. It kind of just glanced off the top of his head. Imagine if that would have, caught him clean. It probably would have been, even worse. But
that would have been a Anthony Pettis, Joe Lauzon sort of just knocked cold and watch him fall to the ground like that toppling statue of a Saddam Hussein falling down. That was the first thing I thought of when I saw Terry Edom just frozen falling down backwards. That was the first bit of imagery that popped in my mind.
That was one of the greatest knockouts, just as far as punch face when someone gets hit. he had his arm out and held his head like full science.
And watching his head bounce off the canvas, that was gnarly. But yet we know now that Cerrone and Pettis, who've been talking a lot recently, are fighting each other. I thought it was pretty ironic that Pettis was calling out Cerrone, saying, "Oh, I'm going after the belt, and you don't have the belt." Like, you realize Cerrone's ranked higher than you in the lightweight division, right? You're like number 9 or number 10 at lightweight maybe. You're not going to get a title shot, so I understand the insult. Yeah, Cerrone doesn't have a belt, but neither do you, buddy.
I don't think Pettis is anywhere near close to a title, and here's why. Donald Cerrone fought 5 times in 2011 alone, twice in 2012, whereas Anthony has had 3 fights since coming over the WEC.
Wow.
He had a dominating loss. It was controversial, but a dominating loss to Guida, a boring ground fight against Jeremy Stevens, who Cerrone just absolutely destroyed, and then a quick 1-minute win against Joe Lauzon. I don't think he has any, leg to stand on when it comes to arguing a fact that he should get it before Donald. It's complete bullshit.
I mean, his win against Benson Henderson is obviously his signature win. If you take that win away from his record, yeah, he does have that really impressive head kick KO against Joe Lauzon, but other than that, he really, his best wins are against guys like Shane Roller and Jeremy Stevens. He's fought twice, or I guess 3 times against top 10 opponents, barely edged out a win against Benson Henderson, literally only because of that Showtime kick, lost a unanimous decision to Clay Guida, and obviously had that head kick against Joe Lauzon, so still very untested, and we'll definitely see what his real status in the lightweight division is when he takes on Donald Cerrone. Do we have a time for for that fight yet, by the way? Has it been announced what card that's going to be at?
No, it's all up in the air. They're working it out. I mean, they just basically, Dana said it was happening at the post-fight conference, and that was, 4 days ago?
Yeah, and Pettis is injured, so they're probably waiting on word to see how long it's going to take him to come back.
I didn't even know he was injured. What happened?
I believe he was injured. Let me look right now. This is great pod. Just talking. He was injured. Okay, it was about 4 or 5 months ago. He had surgery and was out for 8 weeks. I guess I'm glad how this story is not saying what kind of injury he says. Oh, wow. Pettis' injury and what kind of surgery needs has yet to be disclosed. Great story.
Wow.
Great story, 5rounds.com.
Anal fissure.
Right.
Let's say anal fissure.
I'm assuming it was that as well. But yeah, we'll see Donald Cerrone and Pettis hopefully early 2013, if not by the end of the year.
I can't wait for that fight, man. I enjoy Pettis a lot. I think he's a fantastic fighter, but I don't think he really has anything for Donald Cerrone. I mean, I don't see Cerrone finishing Pettis, but I see Cerrone really taking it to him.
Yeah, very much so. Cerrone, I think is going to, that's one thing you love about Cerrone. Cerrone never sits back, even in fights where he's getting dominated, like a fight against Nate Diaz. He's always walking forward, always trying to throw leather, always, keeping the fight active. You really got to respect that.
And I do.
And that booty do. And in the main event, we have just about 3 minutes until we're going to call up Jon Anik. So we'll talk about that briefly before we bring him on. And obviously, there are implications we'll talk about after the Jon Anik interview, like where Edgar goes from here, whether he stays at lightweight. It's already been announced that Henderson's next fight will be against Nate Diaz at UFC on Fox 5. But kind of a controversial decision. Most people had Frankie Edgar winning that fight by decision, but as a big BJ Penn fan, I don't want to say it was redemption for that bullshit decision in Abu Dhabi, but Frankie got his rematch. A lot of people said he wasn't really deserving of it, but really, really razor-close decision that the judges scored 46-49, 48-47, 48-47 in favor of Ben Henderson.
I think Frankie Edgar, as far as redemption goes, let me touch on that point. As far as BJ getting screwed out of a decision, that's not Frankie's fault. I mean, I know that he's your favorite fighter and everything, but it's not like Frankie was making the call. It was just some dumbass judges. But yeah. But as far as the fight goes, the first fight was pretty close. I mean, I think it was simply it went in Ben's favor just for the fact that Frankie looked like he, his eye was put through a fucking trash compactor. He had pink eye or some shit.
I don't know how Frankie Edgar does it, but he, in every fight, gets the craziest bloody nose ever. Just blood pours out of his face.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were to play slap Frankie Edgar, I would just open up his nose and there'd be blood everywhere.
Yeah, I think that Frankie is the Rocky of lightweight division, but
certainly.
As far as this fight went, to be quite honest, man, I think he got completely screwed. I had Frankie 4 rounds to 1. That was me personally. One of them was really close, but no matter what, he at least had 3 of those rounds. So, I mean, he got completely screwed out of it, and I just don't know how that happened, man. I don't know how power leg kicking someone gets you a fight.
We'll call up Anik in 1 minute, but really quick to touch on that point, I actually scored it a draw. I had the first round easily for Henderson, the second round easily for Edgar. I actually had the third round very close, but I gave it to Ben Henderson. The fourth round really close, but I gave it to Frankie Edgar. And the last round, I scored it 10-10. It was so close. Both of them were really aggressive. And after the round finished, I really couldn't decide who to give it to. So I scored it. I scored a Henderson Edgar draw, which put it at 48-48. So it was razor close. And like they always say, you got to beat the man to be the man. Ben Henderson was the man, and Frank just didn't finish the fight like he needed to.
Yeah, that's the one thing about Frankie that he needs to work on is his finishing skills. I mean, at this point, he's only finished 2 fights in the UFC, and he's been in some wars, but I just can't really see him getting another title shot off of a couple of decisions, man. I mean, I just don't see that happening, so ultimately he should probably make the drop to featherweight.
Yep, and without further ado, it is 5:30 on the Pacific Coast, so let's give UFC commentator Jon Anik a little ring-a-roo.
A little ring-a-roon toonie.
Little ring-a-roon tune. God, this podcast is weird. Here we go.
Hello.
Hey, John, how's it going? It's Jake from the MMA Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
My pleasure, man. How's it going?
It's going really well. I guess we'll get right into it. It's been about a year since you traveled over from ESPN to start working for the UFC, and in your year with the UFC, what have you learned so far, and what have you taken out of the experience?
You know, it's hard to believe it's been almost a year. It's certainly been a whirlwind. It may sound trite, but that's certainly what it has felt like. But it's been great. You know, I mean, I never thought, and I've said this many times, once I got to ESPN that I would ever leave. You know, it was 6 great years, but, you know, when the UFC came calling, it was an easy decision for me. That really became the number one destination for me, and, you know, it's been good. You know, obviously the most critical part of my job is calling live fights, and that was certainly the biggest reason that got me on board, and there's been a lot of other things as well, hosting Ultimate Insider, hosting the Ultimate Fighter Live, doing some press conferences, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So it's certainly been busy. You know, I've had the chance to travel to places I never thought I'd go in Brazil and Australia, and I've got 3 more international trips later this year. So it's been very exciting. You know, I wouldn't change a thing. There's certainly, you know, some time away from the family that's a little bit tough, but being able to immerse myself in mixed martial arts and the UFC every day is exactly what I wanted and exactly what I signed up for. So so far, so good, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, most fans actually got to know you on MMA Live on ESPN with Kenny Florian, and you all have great chemistry, and the UFC smartly decided to keep that duo together, bringing you both over to the UFC. I was kind of curious how long you've known Kenny and whose idea it was to keep you together to call UFC fights.
Well, I met Kenny Florian in 2008 when MMA Live was getting off the ground. They had me drive to Boston, actually to Somerville, Massachusetts, where he was training at the time. And, you know, it's hard to believe now. I've known the man for 5 years and consider him a dear friend. But it was funny just going to his gym. And at that time, you know, I was pretty green as far as MMA and the UFC was concerned. I certainly had seen him fight and knew of him, but I certainly wasn't a hardcore fan at that time. And, you know, our friendship, I think, took off pretty quickly. We grew up very similarly in the Metro West Boston area. We've got similar, you know, sense of humors and things like that. So we clicked pretty quickly. And, you know, as far as the UFC coming together, you know, he really auditioned for the job. I mean, after I was hired, I did dry runs with several different UFC fighters, Frank Mir, Stephan Bonner, Rich Franklin, and Kenny sort of won the competition. You know, I'm very happy that he ended up being the guy. Certainly, I think, you know, chemistry takes a long time to develop. We developed some of that at ESPN for sure, but I think you're talking about a different chemistry when it comes to broadcasting a live sporting event. So, you know, we're 9 or 10 fight cards in, and, you know, I expect us to get better each and every time out. You know, I think, you know, some things like talking over each other hasn't been the biggest of issues for us because I think we know when to get out of the way, and we sort of know each other well enough to know when the other is going to chime in. But, you know, it's still a learning process, and there's still a learning curve. And, you know, hopefully when we're talking in 2013, 2014, you know, we iron out some of those wrinkles as well. But, you know, I couldn't be happier with my broadcast partner, and I'm happy that the UFC chose him as the guy.
Awesome. Yeah. Out of the 9 or 10 cards you've done so far, what is the most exciting fight you've called in your opinion?
Man, there's so many to choose from. You know, Martin Kampmann's comeback against Thiago Alves in Australia is the first one that comes to mind. I guess the most recent fight between Chris Weidman and Mark Munoz would probably be the most exciting. I think if you ask fans, what has been the best moment on FX or Fuel TV since the live fights moved over there, and that was certainly a tremendous experience for us to be able to call that fight, and knowing full well that if either party had won in that type of fashion, that they would be calling out Anderson Silva shortly after the fight, and that's exactly what I got in the post-fight interview with Chris Weidman. So that was a huge moment. Even doing the first flyweight fights in UFC history was very exciting for us. That was also in Australia, and we'll always, have a special place for that Nashville show and the main event between Jim Miller and Melvin Gillard, which was the first UFC fight card that we were able to lend our voices to. So it's certainly been a great year, and we've had a lot of seminal moments, but I think I would point to those as the moments that I'm particularly fond of.
Hey, Jon, this is Chris, the co-host of the podcast. I just want to say it's an honor to have you on, man. I've been listening to you for years, and it's just great to have you on.
Oh, my pleasure to talk to you, Chris. I appreciate that a lot, man. Thank you.
No problem, man. So here's my first question. Is that marvelous tan au naturel? Be honest, man.
Yeah, well, I'm living in Las Vegas year-round, so and dude, they put a lot of makeup on us too. So I don't know what exactly you're looking at, but yeah, man, I actually just came in from the pool to do this interview, so it's definitely one of the perks of living in Las Vegas. We got pool weather year-round, and I definitely take advantage of it. So that's a strong first question out of you, Chris. I like it.
Thanks, man. I try to ask some different things, but moving on past that, Dana has hinted at a change to move from the pay-per-view model to free TV, and in an interview I saw him say that 2 years is the goal, and with expansion to new markets like China and Japan, it seems like this is possible. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't think the UFC or any combat sports entity, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts and another promotion, would ever, once they got in the pay-per-view game, get completely out of the pay-per-view game. That's the UFC's bread and butter. That's where they make the majority of their money. And selfishly, as a combat sports fan, I really like the pay-per-view model. I know that's going to fall on some deaf ears because of the price, and I feel it too. I mean, on Saturday night for UFC 150, I'm sitting home ordering Henderson Edgar. The UFC's not paying for that. But for me, it's commercial free, and you can't put a price on that. The fight cards that we do on FX and Fuel TV, and even the shows on Fox, around ends, and something very climactic might have just happened, and they immediately cut to a commercial. And I think it takes away a little bit from the broadcast and sort of takes away from that organic feel, the audio in the corners, and seeing the guys walk back to their corners. So I always appreciate being able to watch mixed martial arts on pay-per-view. I do think you're going to see fewer pay-per-views when you look at the UFC calendar annually with all the shows they're doing on FX, Fuel TV, and Fox. And hopefully for the hardcore and casual fans alike, that you're only talking about 5 or 6 pay-per-views a year for title fights and the biggest fights of the year. I just hope we can do something about the commercials, because I know you guys feel it as well. When we're doing a show on FX, just to give you guys a little sort of insight as to what's going on, when the fighters are walking to the octagon, we're in commercial break, but we're actually still talking for international redistribution, and for some mediums that get our coverage, there aren't commercials internationally. So we're still talking. So then all of a sudden we come back from commercial on FX, and the guy might be getting inspected or making his way into the octagon, and we've sort of provided a lot of background information during that time and humanized these guys, and it's a pretty big challenge for us to make sure we don't repeat ourselves, on the air, and to save nuggets that are really special for that domestic audience here in the United States. But, I just don't like commercials, man. So I hope pay-per-views, even if it's 5 or 6 a year, stick around in some capacity.
Right. Well, very well put, sir. And I got to say, you guys are doing a marvelous job. I mean, I know those are some big shoes to fill, Goldie and Rogan, but you guys are doing more than enough to further that and do a good job.
Well, I appreciate it. It's they've been calling every UFC fight for the last 10 or 12 years, and I know, generally speaking, no one really likes change, but obviously they couldn't keep up with the schedule, and that's why we were brought on board. And I appreciate you saying that. I find that there's criticism that's both constructive and not constructive, and I try to sort of just ignore the negativity and focus on the constructive criticism, because a lot of the feedback I get on Twitter helps me do my job. There are a lot of smart MMA fans that have helped me get better. So I appreciate you saying that, and we're just trying to keep moving forward,
Well, I agree, man, and self-reflecting, like you said, you got to take the good with the bad and figure out what you're doing wrong and improve on that, and I feel that me and Jake here are doing the same thing with our podcast, man. It was rough the first couple episodes, but, we're doing our best from the criticism that we get. My dream commentating team is Joe Rogan, Michael Chiavello, and you. How would you like to mix it up with those guys?
Oh, it would be a dream, man. Chiavello's certainly a character, and for my money, Joe Rogan's the best in the business. That would be an absolute dream come true. I looked up to both of those guys from afar, and it's been nice now in my current spot to be able to meet both of those guys and, be able to sort of, pick their brains, and they just have tremendous insight into mixed martial arts. I would never put myself on their level when it comes to mixed martial arts knowledge. I'm getting there, but they've been at this a long time. When I was hosting sports talk radio in Boston or doing fantasy football shows at ESPN, these guys have been immersed in MMA for a long time. So that would be an absolute dream, man, and who knows down the line what could happen.
Yeah, nice. You got the awesome opportunity to transition from a fan of the sport to working for the UFC. You mentioned the international commercial issue. What's something else that happens behind the scenes in production that fans don't normally get a grasp of?
It's a good question. There's a lot of different things. One thing I can say, a lot of the voiceover work that we do for the UFC is different than I experienced at ESPN, where almost everything we did was either live or what's called live to tape. You might tape it, but you tape it live. You don't stop down for mistakes or anything like that. When I did some college football stuff for ESPN, everything was live. But the way the UFC show is constructed, we're on headset for 6 hours. We're calling 12 fights, and it's essentially like doing a 20 or 25-inning baseball game or doing back-to-back NBA games. So it's an absolute grind. So when you see some of the combo features that air both in the arena and on the telecast, a lot of that stuff is pre-recorded, pre-voiced, and it's all written out beforehand. And that was sort of an adjustment for me because I had been so used to doing everything live and preferred to do it live, where I think, my best work comes out. You can sort of gauge the atmosphere and the energy and sort of broadcast accordingly. But thank God we do it that way, boys, because it's 6.5 hours on the headset, and you really do have to pace yourself to make sure that when the big fights arrive at the end of the night, you still have that energy. And I would also say, just for me, always working for broadcast entities, to work for a promoter has just resulted in me having to make some adjustments, to make sure that I'm executing the vision of the promoter, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and making sure that, we're shedding a positive light on these guys who are the best fighters in the world. Not that I'm not critical. I mean, believe me, I've offended fighters, and Kenny and I tell it like it is, but it's a little bit different when you're working for a broadcast network like ESPN than working for the promoter, the UFC.
Well, yeah, we actually did play-by-play too for the first season of Bellator. Was it pretty different working for Bellator, or has working with the UFC been a big change?
It's been a huge change, and I think that just comes with the territory of working for the monster that is the UFC. When I was called on to do Bellator, it materialized maybe 3 or 4 weeks before season 1. And we were on television internationally, but we were only on the internet in the United States, and it was an adjustment for me. I had called some live stuff for ESPN, but I had never called mixed martial arts before. So, I sat down to do that first Bellator fight, and I was pretty anxious, man, just because I had never laid my voice to mixed martial arts before, and I really didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I think ultimately in life everything's about repetitions, and when I sat down to call that first fight, I didn't have any, but you grow on the job and you learn, and it was really cool to see an upstart promotion like Bellator sort of get off the ground, and I'll always take pride in the work we did on season 1. I do see some similarities between Dana White and Bjorn Rebney, two guys who will stop at nothing to get the job done, and even though Bjorn has had to alienate some people on the way and has had to make some tough decisions, not unlike Dana White, you knew that he was going to succeed come hell or high water, and I have a lot of respect for him and his staff and what they've been able to do and sort of, become the consensus number 2 promotion here in the States. But it's a completely different animal working for the UFC, given their track record and how long they've been established as the MMA juggernaut, and not a ton of similarities other than, just calling the fights when they touch the gloves,
Yeah, that's really awesome. You've got an identical twin brother. What are the chances you try and slip him in to announce a UFC fight without telling anybody?
Well, dude, he might not be as tan as I am, but he's got hair down to his shoulders, so I don't know how that would work exactly. You know, I've been shaving my head since I was 16 years old, and he's been growing it out almost as long. So I don't know that would work. But, you know, he did major in musical theater. He does have a theater background and an acting background. So maybe if he gets a haircut and maybe if he puts on 10 pounds or so, we can slide him in there. He's become he's obviously a big Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics, Bruins guy, but he's definitely come around on the UFC. He was a little slow going at first, but now he is definitely a hardcore MMA fan and immersing himself in everything UFC. So that's been sort of exciting for me to see, and who knows what will happen down the line. I mean, I would love to work with him in some capacity. I kind of doubt it'll be calling UFC fights, but we'll see.
That's really awesome that you got a twin brother, man. You know, someone to share a lot of things with, and who knows down the road, like you said, shave him up, put him in. We'll see what happens. But what is your dream fight to commentate for? We talked about the ones that you've commentated for already that were really great. What's a fight down the pipe that you would love to call? Maybe like an Anderson Silva GSP or Alistair Overeem Dos Santos. What kind of a fight would you just love to get the chance to commentate for?
Gosh, the list is so long. You know, what was pretty cool for us about doing those dry runs was that we got to call a lot of pay-per-views. So when John Jones beat Lyoto Machida in Toronto, when Shogun Rua and Dan Henderson fought in that epic encounter in San Jose back in November, we were doing our dry runs and able to call those fights. And we did the Nick Diaz-Carlos Condit fight for UFC 143. We did the 3D broadcast that was in movie theaters. So those are some of the biggest fights I have called. I would say, you know, Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre would probably be the answer. You know, as much as fans are pining for a fight between Anderson Silva and Jon Jones, I don't think that's as realistic as a mega fight between Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre. And given that GSP and Silva's primes have been intertwined, you know, Jon Jones came along well after Silva and St. Pierre were established as the consensus top 2 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And their primes and their title reigns have happened simultaneously. So to me, that's still the biggest fight you can make in MMA and the fight that I would be absolutely honored to call. It's a good question, though. I mean, you know, I have a lot of close friends in the sport whose fights I would love to call, you know, so there are a lot of different options. But, you know, that conversation, whether it's a dream fight for me to watch or to call, it always sort of begins and ends with Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre.
Yeah, man, same here. I'd love to see that fight, but do you think that a catch weight is the way to go with that one? Do you want to see a middleweight, welterweight, or a catch weight for that? I'm thinking probably 180 or 175 would be optimal for those guys to fight at.
Yeah, I don't know that Anderson Silva can cut down to 175. Maybe he could squeeze 180. I actually think it's more likely that George St. Pierre would take enough time to bulk up to middleweight and they would fight at 185. I know the Silva camp has mentioned, you know, a catch weight. I just find it hard to believe he could get much below 180 or 182. And that's really the biggest issue with that fight, because when you see those guys side by side, at least from a height standpoint, you know, George St. Pierre is closer to my height than he is to Anderson Silva, who's 6'2.5", 6'3". And there is a legitimate size discrepancy between those two guys. So I think if there's any holdup, it would be the size. And you know, I think maybe 182, you know, just to throw George St. Pierre a little bit of a bone, but I really think Anderson Silva would be compromised if he had to go a pound below 180. I don't even know that in good faith he could sign a contract for 175. I just have my doubts as to whether or not he'd be able to make it.
I completely agree, and I think the one thing that's keeping that fight competitive is the reach factor. George St. Pierre has a monster reach for welterweight, so I just think that would be great. Kind of moving away from super fights and back to Bellator, how crazy is it that Bjorn Rebney's dad is Jack Rebney, the Winnebago man? A lot of people don't know that.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I remember when somebody forwarded that video to me for the first time, and, you know, I knew at the time that it was Bjorn's dad. You know, you do see a few similarities there, and I've certainly seen Bjorn in some moments where he's been celebrating and in some moments where he hasn't been all that happy, which is probably closer to the Winnebago man. But, dude, that is nuts. And it's a story that I don't even know if it's gotten enough pub. You know, that's remarkable. And
I agree.
Certainly we got a good laugh about that back in 2009 for sure.
I didn't even know that until about a month ago, so that's really just been on my mind lately.
Crazy, man.
Yeah. So you're the play-by-play commentator with Kenny Florian, and actually when the fights are over, you step in the octagon and ask fighters a few questions. What's more difficult, trying to come up with good play-by-play commentary, or coming up with good questions to ask the fighters in the 60 seconds or however long you have between the decision being announced and the post-fight interview?
You know, it's a good question. I mean, I've been interviewing athletes for years, and that's certainly something that is a skill that's been developed, and I feel very comfortable doing it. I have less experience doing play-by-play, so I think that's probably the bigger challenge for me. And you know, I'm not a trained mixed martial artist. You know, I have dabbled in boxing, and I do plan on taking some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes. But, you know, I grew up playing baseball, football, and basketball like everybody else. So for me, and watching those sports. So for me, it's the biggest challenge is calling mixed martial arts action. Even though I've watched hundreds of thousands of hours of it, that's still something that is fairly new to me. If you can say calling 150 or 200 fights is still new. You do bring up a good point, though, because the fight ends, and I still have some of the trafficking responsibilities on the broadcast as the play-by-play guy. I throw it to Bruce Buffer, literally slam the headset down and get to the octagon as quickly as I can. So I don't have a ton of time to really think about the direction that I'm going to go with those interviews. Ultimately, you know, what's always been my goal as a sports broadcast journalist is to keep the focus on the athletes, keep the focus on the fighter, try to get in and get out and let them shine in the moment that they deserve to shine in. And, you know, I will tell you that Joe Silva really likes when we try to ask them who they might like next. I know a lot of guys aren't prepared to answer that question. They're not the calling out type, and they don't want to sort of go on the offensive by calling guys out on live television. But, you know, Joe Silva's got a very difficult job, and if there's a grudge match or a fighter that wants to fight another fighter, he's all ears. So we are definitely encouraged to sort of begin the matchmaking process in the post-fight interview process. We don't do it all the time, but we try to pick our spots and give Joe Silva a little bit of nod and help him do his job, you know.
Do you come up with the questions all the time, or will the production team ever feed you a note card with some potential questions?
Well, I have producers in my ear all night long, and that's certainly a challenge that I'm sure you guys are starting to experience a little bit. But when I do the post-fight interviews, I have carte blanche. They don't get in my ear. There's a lot of different things going on and a lot of traffic. I got to get back and get to the Metro PCS move of the fight. There's so many things going on. You know, I've got about 90 seconds or 2 minutes, give or take, and might have time for one or two questions. But, you know, I think you guys as fans and journalists know what sort of are the right questions to ask. You know, I'm not in there trying to instigate. I'm not in there trying to push any sort of agenda. You know, I ask them about sort of the big moments in the fight, maybe look ahead a little bit. If they were stunned in the fight despite winning, we certainly want to talk about that. But, you know, it's pretty straightforward. It's really an enjoyable part of the job for me. And given the fact that Rogan does that for that broadcast team, it wasn't an opportunity that I thought was going to come my way. So I'm very happy that they've entrusted me to do that. And hopefully we're extracting some good stuff from those guys post-fight. You know, the toughest thing for me in the first year was actually doing the Ultimate Fighter live and having to interview guys after their dream had sort of gone away, the guys who had lost those fights, because they just don't have a lot to say, and I only was able to ask one quick question. That was probably the most challenging part of the year for me, was having to interview a guy like Vince Pichel after, you know, he loses to Ally Aquinta. That was not much fun. It's far easier to interview a winner than a loser, that's for sure.
I bet. And we have a couple more non-MMA related questions before we'll let you go. First,
sure.
I'm actually from Tampa, so I'll resist my instincts to make fun of your Red Sox.
Hi, dude, you can fire away, man. And, you know, it's funny. My twin brother bet on the Rays at 14-1 to win the World Series. Then recently they ballooned up to 25-1. So he got the Rays at 25-1, and I know what happened today with Felix Hernandez's perfect game, but they look pretty good, man.
Yeah, today wasn't the best day for my Rays, but what do you think is the issue with the Red Sox not being able to really produce on the field this year?
You know, it's going to sound like I'm making excuses, and I guess when I look at the run differential, they really haven't been that bad a baseball team. They've lost a lot of close games. They've been competitive. The starting rotation, John Lesser and Josh Beckett really haven't gotten it done at the top. They have had injuries. Every team has injuries, but I think when you lose your number 1 and number 2 hitters in Carl Crawford and Jacoby Ellsbury for the first half of the season, it's hard not to tread water a little bit. I don't really bark up Bobby Valentine's tree and think that there's management issues. I mean, I think there were some issues with ownership, mishandling some things last year, and in a perfect world, Terry Francona would still be here. But they have just underachieved. It's pretty simple. They've been in a lot of games, and they haven't gone their way. And given all the talent, and I see, by the way, the Orioles have just put up a 3 spot in the bottom of the 6th inning, so it's now 3-2, and the Red Sox are losing again. But they just, it's disappointing, man, when you look at that roster on paper, they're stacked. And, I will say for a lot of us in Boston, we never thought they would win the World Series, never mind winning 2 in 4 years. And the fact that, since I've graduated college, I've seen all 4 major sports teams win a championship, it almost feels like anything else would be gravy. You never want to see a team below 500 with that much talent, but it does soften the blow a little bit when you grow up your whole life thinking they're never going to win, and then lo and behold, they won twice. So it's been a long season, man, and I guess we're just looking forward to the Patriots and the Celtics at this point.
Yeah, I checked last night, and the Yankees are something like plus 46. The Red Sox are like plus 35. Kind of wild they have such different records. But how many times a year are you able to get up to Boston and catch a game at Fenway now with the UFC gig going on?
It's tough. It really is, and I've got a daughter who just turned 1, which makes it difficult to travel across the country. My twin brother's in Florida, so my sister's the last of the Mohicans there in Boston. So I will be up there for Thanksgiving. I don't know if I'll be able to catch any of the – I might be able to catch a Celtics or a Bruins game, but certainly wouldn't be able to catch a Red Sox game. So last time I was at Fenway, I think, was the 2010 season. And, Boston has a very special place in my heart, and of course – if I could live anywhere, it would be there. But we're enjoying Las Vegas. We're enjoying no snow and no cold, and hope to get my daughter to Fenway. I'm just hoping she's a Red Sox fan. My wife and her brother are Mets fans, and I'm just hoping that I have enough pull to make sure that Riley roots for the Red Sox, because I just don't know if she's rocking Mets gear in the house, how I could really live with that,
Oh, God.
You guys are speaking Mandarin to me with all the sports talk. I only follow combat sports. I swear to God, it was like another language.
Well, hey, if it makes you feel any better, as I get ready for my fantasy football draft, I am far less prepared than I have been in past years. I literally lived and breathed all sports for 6 years and spent, half my life, if not more, in Bristol. So I'm sort of out of the loop right now too, man, immersing myself in MMA. I'm just glad I had a few nuggets when I was asked about the Red Sox, because I don't get asked every day.
Yeah, I couldn't be pumped more for a football season. I have Drew Brees and Megatron on my fantasy football team.
Oh, boy.
So I'm looking forward to that one.
Megatron from the Transformers?
Yeah, actually, yep. He's now in the NFL.
All right, so my last question for you, John, is it's a strange one, I'll admit. It's not about your tan. I ask every guest that we have what their favorite ice cream flavor is. Chris Liebens was bubblegum. Charlie Brenneman was a vanilla malt shake. What is Jon Anik's favorite ice cream?
Well, maybe this is a different answer than you're used to getting. I'm lactose intolerant, so I mean, dude, it's brutal. I mean, I love vanilla ice cream, just a pure vanilla or an ice cream sandwich. I went so far as to take a bite of an ice cream sandwich and spit it out a couple of years ago because I was so craving an ice cream sandwich. But I just hope that my daughter doesn't get my genes, because my whole family just pounds ice cream, and it's very difficult that I just have. I mean, honestly, guys, growing up, and I don't tell this to everyone, we would go to Dairy Queen, and I would get a hot dog because my whole family got to get ice cream, and I was so bummed out. So my dessert was a hot dog. So, yeah, man, that's a good question. I wish I had a better answer for you.
I'm sorry, fella.
Hey, I'll live,
Hey, John, thank you so much for coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. We're very honored. Definitely follow Jon_Anik on Twitter. You have any plugs? Usually fighters have tons of sponsors and whatnot, so I guess you might not have many fight sponsors, but you have any plugs or shout-outs before we let you go?
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Good luck with the show. I would just say if y'all could watch UFC Ultimate Insider every Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific on Fuel TV. And if you're one of the many that doesn't get Fuel TV, hopefully you can switch to DirecTV and get it. But if not, and you do have an FSN, Fox Sports Net affiliate in your market, it does replay several times a week on there. So hopefully you can catch Ultimate Insider, and appreciate the support from you guys and the MMA community, and wish you the best of luck with your podcast.
Yeah, definitely every Tuesday. It's a great hour of TV. You have UFC tonight, and after that, UFC Ultimate Insider, and I try not to miss it any week because it's really, really great programming. And thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, John.
My pleasure, fellas. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too, guys. Thanks.
And that was UFC commentator Jon Anik. Wow, what an awesome interview. What a poor guy, lactose intolerant. That sucks.
I feel like such a fucking asshole.
Oh, God. Oh, well, hey, it was awesome to have him on, and hopefully we will have him on again in the future. It's kind of funny how mixed martial arts is such a brutal and violent sport, but it seems like every person we've had on this show has been nothing but nice and nothing but a gentleman, and I guess we're keeping the streak alive with awesome podcasts.
Yeah, he was a class act, man. What a pleasure to talk to that guy, get inside his head. You know, he's in one of those weird spots where he was taking the reins over for Goldie and Rogan, and those are some big shoes to fill, like we talked about. So, it's just one of those things where it's just great to see, inside a mind like that. That was awesome.
Yeah, and what a lucky guy going from commentating Bellator to going to the behemoth of ESPN, becoming an MMA fan, and then going to the UFC. I guess you can't really attribute too much of it to luck, because Anik is very, very well spoken and is an awesome commentator.
Yeah, I was gonna say that guy never slips up. He's always on point. He knows exactly what he's talking about. He never sounds unsure of himself. We didn't get to ask him what his major in college is, but if I had to guess, it's probably communications.
Man, I was stammering around. I was saying, it sounded like he was reading poetry. He had like 2 or 3 paragraphs ready after every single question. Really went into great detail on everything, and really nice fellow too. So like we said before, follow him on Twitter, Jon_Anik, and definitely tune in to UFC Ultimate Insider on Fuel TV every Tuesday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow that guy. He's a class act, and I will be writing a sonnet for Mr. Anik at some point.
Oh, I was going to write a haiku. Funny. 575. What's the syllables for haiku? Anyway, we were talking about Benson Henderson versus Frankie Edgar before we called up Mr. Anik, so I guess let's get back to that razor-thin decision, and I think the last point we were making before we called him up was the fact that you got to beat the man to be the man. It's kind of crazy how Edgar and his, you look at his fight record, and his last 6 fights are BJ Penn, Gray Maynard, Ben Henderson, Ben Henderson, and I think that's been unprecedented in the sport of mixed martial arts. Having 2 rematches back to back is crazy enough. 3 rematches is absolutely insane, but unfortunately is not able to capitalize on the last fight. He's definitely one of the best lightweights out there. 3-2-1 in his last 6 fights. But a lot of people are hinting that this fight against Ben Henderson was going to be his last fight at lightweight, because Frankie Edgar, he is truly the Rocky of mixed martial arts. You watch his fights and you think, wow, he's a smaller guy. He is really tremendously smaller. He walks around at 155 pounds. His boxing trainer actually said once, a couple weeks after a fight, he brought his family to Disney World, and obviously, came back a little bit heavier. Still weighed about 157 pounds. Like, still could have weighed in and fought after a vacation. And most of these guys fighting at lightweight weigh between 170 and 190 pounds. Seeing a guy that small not only fight at lightweight, but win the lightweight championship, defend his belt twice. Really, really great fighter, and he's, God, if he starts cutting weight and starts fighting guys his size, who knows? And, we say that Jose Aldo is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Who knows the kinds of challenges that Frank Edgar is going to give him once he starts to cut?
I actually agree with you on that point. I think that Frankie, if he made that cut to featherweight, I honestly could see him finishing fights. Because if you're fighting guys that are immensely bigger than you every single time you go out there in the octagon, of course it's going to be rough. But he has put on some amazing displays. His, arguably his greatest win was against Gray Maynard when he finished him in the fourth round, or I think it was the fourth round in their title fight at UFC 136. I think if he faces guys his size, he won't have a speed advantage necessarily, but he's still got that heart. He'll have a strength advantage, and I could see him really making waves at 145.
Definitely. And also a reminder, we're talking about UFC 150. We're about to talk about the upcoming Strikeforce card. We got a lot of news to break down. If you want to jump on and join the conversation, we'd love you to call up and let us know what you think. Give us a call at 646-378-1046 and let us know what you think. But moving on, it's a lot of people thought Edgar got robbed, but obviously Dana White isn't going to schedule another Frankie Edgar rematch, and all signs are pointing to him dropping down in weight.
Yeah, and hopefully he makes the right decision. He actually said that he's staying at lightweight, so I don't really see that happening unless he has a crushing loss in his next fight.
Definitely. I guess that kind of wraps it up for UFC 150. Benson Henderson's next fight will be at UFC on Fox 5 against Nate Diaz. We'll move on to Strikeforce. Again, that number one more time if you want to call in, 646-378-1046. Go ahead and save it in your phone if you want, because it's the same number every episode. If you want to call in this week or next week, that is the number. But great card. The UFC is definitely made up for that UFC 149 snoozer, and this was well worth the $60. Speaking of which, how crazy is that they don't give Jon Anik free pay-per-views? He has to pay out of his paycheck to watch the fight that he calls. Like, you would almost think the UFC would want him to watch these to pick up tips and pointers from the senior broadcasting team of Rogan and Goldberg. But no, I guess he's got to shill out $60 every Saturday they have a pay-per-view.
That is beyond bullshit, but to be honest, man, it's not uncommon. I know plenty of people who work their ass off for a company and they don't get more than like a 10% off. So it's not uncommon in American business. It sucks, but it is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, when I was interning with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last summer, I actually asked if I could, I didn't want anything for free. I just wanted to be able to do stadiums in the football stadium after work. And I was told, nope, can't do that. Like, really? I'm working for free every day from 9 until 5, and I can't even use your empty stadium? Come on.
Yeah, that's some bullshit, man. I mean, there's got to be an overhaul or something, because if you're really being that, what's the right word here? If you're being that thrifty with your own employees, it's probably not a good thing.
Nice way to not use a racial slur there. Moving on, I guess let's hit our 10 solid seconds of sports, which is our segment where, because we don't want to bore the MMA fan with too much news about other sports, like I probably did to MMA fans when I was asking Jon Anik about the Red Sox, we only take 10 seconds every week to break down the world of sports. So without any further ado, let me catch my breath here. And... the thing played wrong. I can't find where this is. Let's do the 10 seconds of sports after we preview TJ Cook versus Ovince St. Preux. How about we do that? Because I can't seem to find where I wrote out my 10 seconds of sports. Great pre-planning by your host, Jake Walters.
What the fuck?
Oh, wait, no. Here it is, 10 seconds of sports. Let's do it. The NFL preseason starts, so we all have something other to watch other than baseball. The United States proves it's the best country ever in the history of the world and the history of the universe by winning the overall gold medal count. China, these colors don't run. Bam! by the giant explosion of ectoplasm.
Yeah, it ran out.
It actually ran out. It's actually been a pretty slow week of sports. We only had the closing ceremony, which I don't know if you watched the opening or closing ceremony of the Olympics, but it made absolutely no sense and was borderline psychedelic in how stupid it was. But yeah, and the rest of sports, we have baseball, which is 162 games, so nothing really matters on a day-by-day basis with baseball. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the NFL and NBA coming into full swing. It's going to be fun. And I've probably spent like 3 minutes talking about other sports now, so I'm going to shut up.
I'm still stuck on borderline psychedelic.
It was borderline psychedelic. You must not have watched the closing ceremonies. It made absolutely no sense. There was a giant inflatable octopus in the middle of an arena, and there was a DJ in it, like pretending to be a DJ. And then, literally, I'm not making any of this up, Russell Brand comes out in some weird clown car singing "I Am the Eggman, I Am the Walrus" by John Lennon, and then the Spice Girls come out in a bunch of like double-decker cars, and looks like they're about to wreck with each. Oh no, it made absolutely zero sense.
Wait a second, the Olympics are over?
The Olympics are over.
Oh, you could have fooled me. Huh.
And the U.S. is the greatest country in the history of the universe.
Yeah, America.
Sorry, China. These colors don't fade. These colors don't run. Yeah, let's preview this Strikeforce Rousey Kaufman card, which is going to be this Saturday, 3 days from today. It's headlined by the 135-pound championship. Ronda Rousey looking to defend her belt for the first time after taking it from Miesha Tate this March 3rd. But yeah, we have a few fights below. The first fight, I guess we'll talk about, former Tennessee Volunteer football player Ovince St. Preux fighting against T.J. Cook.
Is that why you don't like him? Because he's from Tennessee?
That is why I don't like him. Yeah, I mentioned to you before the podcast that I didn't like him, and I didn't mention why. But yeah, I'm a giant Florida Gator fan. Obviously, I went to the University of Florida, and Ovince St. Preux played football for the University of Tennessee, and they're our rivals. So, sorry, OSP.
Let me put it this way with this fight. I don't know who T.J. Cook is. OSP was highly touted in Strikeforce, which isn't saying much, but he beat a bunch of nobodies. Then he faced Gegard Mousasi, who is a fantastic talent at 185 and 205. He's fought more at middleweight than 205, and he went in there and absolutely manhandled OSP. That being said, I've got OSP in this fight, most likely to finish.
Both of these guys coming off losses, but they're coming off losses against vastly different opponents. T.J. Cook is coming off a loss to the relatively unknown Trevor Smith at Strikeforce Challengers 20. That was actually last November, and he lost by a first-round guillotine choke with about 30 seconds left to go in the round. Actually, it's kind of funny. His last two fights, a loss to Trevor Smith in the first round with 30 seconds to go, and a win against Lionel Lanham at Strikeforce Challenger 17, and that one he actually got a TKO with 1 second left in the first round. So if TJ Cook's going to do anything, watch the last 30 seconds of the first round. But yeah, Cook lost to a much inferior guy when you look at who they've lost to. Cook lost to Trevor Smith. OSP lost to Gegard Mousasi. And it was even less decisive a finish. That was a decision, whereas Cook got finished. So I agree with you. Even though OSP is a volunteer, that's the name of the football team, the Tennessee Volunteers. Even though he's a volunteer, I got him beating T.J. Cook in this one.
I think one of my favorite...
that is the least intimidating nickname ever. You know, Florida, we have the Gators. They're kind of fearsome. Georgia has the Bulldogs. Florida State has the Seminoles. They were, kind of a very, very aggressive Indian tribe, and they have the Tomahawk Chop. Tennessee has the Volunteers. Like, we're going to put forth lots of effort for no pay to try and help the community. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite avatars and nicknames on a forum was a guy named Gayhard Moose and a dash and Saucy, the word saucy, and his picture was a picture of Gegard Mousasi cooking a bowl of stew with a moose head in it.
Yeah, that's actually one guy's name who I know how to pronounce, and I don't need to leave to you to pronounce his name for me.
Yeah, I've got 40 handwritten certificates of pronunciation.
You do 40 and growing. But, OSP, definitely both of us have OSP winning that one. Tarek Saffiedine versus Roger Bowling. If you don't know who either of these guys are, which I feel like a lot of part-time MMA fans might not know Roger Bowling or Tarek Saffiedine, definitely find out who these guys are, because both of these guys can really, really put forth an exciting fight.
Yeah, Roger Bowling is one of those guys who he's very unheralded. He had I think 3 fights with what's his name? I'm going to butcher this. Actually, I can't even remember it. Guy in Strikeforce, they had a couple fights against each other, and they were close fights until the last one where the other guy TKO'd him. He's kind of unknown in the circuit, but he's a power punching, kind of a mauler, kind of like a Justin Wilcox kind of a guy. And then you've got Tarek Saffiedine. He trains out of Team Quest in Temecula with Dan Henderson. He's got some really technical kickboxing, really well-rounded guy. He beat Scott Smith. He's faced some major names in Strikeforce. So I've got Saffiedine in this one, most likely by a decision. And these colors don't run.
Oh, these colors don't run. I muted myself like a genius does. Tarek Saffiedine, I said both of these guys have put forth very impressive records, but Tarek Saffiedine's been on kind of a roll. He dominated Scott Smith back a year ago at Strikeforce Fedor versus Henderson, and also dominated Tyler Stinson with some awesome striking. So he's definitely back in the mix when it comes to the Strikeforce welterweight division. And Roger Bowling, he's one of these guys almost like a Melvin Gillard. He is ferocious, and he can put forth some strong strikes, some strong punches. But he is one of these guys who has, he'll come out roaring in the first round, but when it comes to the second round and third round, he's kind of had a little bit of a questionable gas tank, only because he puts out so much effort in the first round. So if Saffiedine's able to weather that first round storm, I have him winning this fight.
Absolutely, right there with you. I wish I could remember that guy's name, and I don't feel like looking it up. But Bowling has had some wars with some guys. I just don't think he's ready for a guy at the Tarek Saffiedine level.
Mm-hmm. He actually fought a guy named Bobby Volker 3 times.
That's it, Volker. That's the one. They headlined Challenger Series.
Volker actually handed him both of his losses. He's 1-2 against Bobby Volker and 11-2 overall. So against people not named Bobby Volker, Roger Bowling's 10-0. He fought Volker 3 times. Roger Bowling also has early wins. You look at his record, and his first 6 fights were all first round finishes. He beat Shamar Bailey 28 seconds into the first round in April 2008, and actually he fought Seth Baczynski in March 2009 and got a very quick 9-second knockout. So one of these guys, he comes out, fist blaring. His last fight was actually at the last card that Ronda Rousey fought on as well, on March 3rd, and he fought Brandon Sailing, also an up-and-coming welterweight. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Roger Bowling can keep it going against a guy like Tarek Saffiedine, who's so well-rounded and is coming off a roll. Then the next fight up is going to be at middleweight. We have Ronaldo Jacare Souza versus another up-and-coming guy, which you have so many of these up-and-coming talents in Strikeforce, and Jacare is going to take on Derek Brunson.
I only have one thing to say. I'm going to keep it simple. Bye-bye, Brunson.
Bye-bye, Brunson, yeah. Jacare, even in his fight against Luke Rockhold, looked like he had moments where he had a chance to win the fight. So I also agree with you. I think Jacare is a elite level fighter. Even though he lost to Luke Rockhold, he roared right back, and at that Tate Rousey card, got a win against Bristol Morunde, third round, beautiful arm triangle choke. And I think what's his face, Derek Brunson definitely has a long career in front of him. Pretty young guy. He's 28 years old, but he's coming off a loss against Kendall Grove. If he just lost to Kendall Grove, I don't see any way he rebounds with a win against Jacare.
Well, Jacare, his nickname Jacare means the crocodile, and it's because of the grip. His grip is so strong. I've seen a video of Ronaldo Souza pulling himself up a 30-foot rope one-handed. He used one hand and one arm to pull his entire frame 30 feet up a goddamn rope. I'm sorry, but you're not gonna beat that guy when you just lost to fucking what's his face.
To Kendall Grove, and Derek Brunson was actually undefeated before that fight against Kendall Grove, which was recent. It was 2 months ago, June 16th. But I totally agree. And in this fight, he actually was supposed to fight Jacare on March 3rd. But the Ohio State Athletic Commission denied his fight based on an eye exam he had submitted. Derek fought wearing contacts in all his bouts, but Ohio had a rule against this, and Derek immediately scheduled a LASIK procedure to fix that. He was out 6 weeks, and now he will be fighting Sans Contacts this week, Saturday, against the Crocodile, Ronaldo Souza.
Good luck.
Good luck. I don't. Say. It's not as much as a one-sided middleweight scrap as say Yushin Okami, Buddy Roberts, but Derek Brunson, it would be a huge upset if he won this fight.
Yep. So bet your money on Derek Brunson.
And in the main fight of the night, actually a women's MMA fight. You know, it's kind of wild in a sport that has, been historically so masculinely dominated. It's kind of cool seeing two women headline a card with a bunch of men fighting on it, and these are two of the best women in the world. You have Ronda Rousey, who I think most people think that Rousey and Cyborg are the best women in MMA. They're kind of akin to GSP and Anderson Silva. Ronda Rousey, just look at her record. It is absolutely incredible. You have guys like Jiva Santos, the arm collector, who was known for getting armbar after armbar after armbar, but after he got thrown in to fight elite competition, it dropped off. He stopped doing that. He started losing fights by decision. But Jesus Christ, Ronda Rousey is now the Strikeforce champion. She's reached the top level of women's MMA, and every single fight, still, even against Miesha Tate, every single one of her fights, first round armbar. She's 8-0, including her amateur record. Every fight winning by armbar. She's yet to get to the second round of a fight. It's one of the most incredible fight records you've seen before. Actually, before the Miesha Tate fight, she hadn't even fought a full minute in a fight. She all 7 of her fights ending 57 seconds or sooner in the first round by submission. So Miesha is maybe one of the best female wrestlers in mixed martial arts, so she was able to use her strength to kind of delay the inevitable. But, 4.5 minutes in, Rousey just really brutally tore a couple ligaments in her elbow and everything. Miesha really proved she's a warrior, not tapping out. And Miesha is actually going to fight Julie Kedzie on the same card. And she's a huge favorite there. She's probably another win or two away from getting a rematch with Rousey. But Ronda Rousey, one of the most incredible mixed martial arts records you'll see. She's so, she has a lot of judo accolades. She was the gold medal winner at the 2007 Rio de Janeiro Pan American Games, won gold in 2004 and 2005 at the Pan American Judo Championships. Actually was a bronze medalist at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. So she's She's a very, very high-level judokan and obviously is super skilled on the ground, training with Eddie Bravo at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, she's definitely something else. What a crazy record.
She's one of those girls that I'm turned on by her, and I'm still legitimately scared that she would kick the fuck out of me.
Yeah. Usually the two don't necessarily merge with each other. A girl who can easily beat the shit out of you, either standing up or rolling, I don't want to say aren't the most attractive ones, but usually I'm more into chicks that can't beat me up. Rousey's got that very, very, very unorthodox mix of being very, very attractive and having some killer skills. Actually, was just in the ESPN body issue where she posed naked and got a lot of flack for that because she had given other fighters flack about turning it into a sex appeal thing. Miesha Tate, I think, kind of led the charge on that, calling her a bit of a hypocrite for doing that. But it wasn't like she was posing in a porno or anything. She was just doing it for ESPN, the magazine body issue. Holy shit! Wow, Chris just sent me a picture that is a picture of Ronda Rousey from the body issue, but it has Uriah Faber's face photoshopped into Ronda Rousey's face. And I don't know if I can ever look at Ronda Rousey or Uriah Faber the same after you sent me that. Jesus Christ.
Moving back to the breakdown.
Oh, that's horrible. That's awesome, though. Moving back to the breakdown, though. How do you see the fight playing out, man?
Well, first I'm going to say that it's taken a long time for me to warm up to women's MMA. I remember back in 2009 they had a Cyborg fight on the main card of a Strikeforce, and I'd never watched a women's MMA fight before, and it legitimately grossed me out to watch two chicks beating each other up, to see Cyborg just beating the fuck out of, I forget this chick's name, it was like Akomi, like some little Japanese chick. Cyborg beat the fuck out of her, and then, after watching Gina Carano fight Cyborg, I warmed up to it, and ever since then, I just feel that, the skill level and the talent is a lot better than it used to be, and I've really warmed up to it, and I think Ronda is one of those chicks that she mixes the best aspects of Cyborg and Carano. She's beautiful, but she's talented. She's strong and a great competitor with amazing skills, but she's humble. I think she is the best thing that could have happened for women's MMA. And Sarah Kaufman is a legit threat. She's been training stand-up for a long time. The problem is that Gina is so good, such a good specialist at, arm bars, judo, and jiu-jitsu that... You
mean Ronda?
Who did I say?
You said Gina.
No, I meant Ronda. I'm thinking about Gina. She's still hot. So Ronda is just so goddamn good at what she does that I just don't see any way that Sarah Kaufman can throw a couple combos and fight the clinch. I think Ronda gets the clinch, takes her down, and dominates her like she's done to every single other woman. If she can hang with the Diaz brothers, Jake Shields, Gilbert Melendez, I'm sorry, Sarah Kaufman, but there's nothing that you can bring to the table that's going to make a bit of difference. Fight.
I think most people would argue that in the 135-pound women's division, the top four fighters are Rousey, Tate, Kaufman, and Marlos Conan. Kaufman's actually only loss is to Conan by armbar, coincidentally. But that's actually her only loss. She has wins against top female fighters. She beat Liz Carmouche, Alexis Davis. She actually beat Miesha Tate back in 2009, which was Tate's. I believe Tate has 3 losses now: one against Rousey, one against Kaufman, and one early on in her career before she got good. It was like her first or second fight. So yeah, Kaufman definitely makes the most sense for who should fight Rousey next. Tate actually was arguing before the Rousey fight that Kaufman deserved a shot more than Rousey did. But if Kaufman's already been armbarred by Marlos Conan, who doesn't have, I think, near the skills of armbarring people that Ronda Rousey has, I feel bad for whichever arm Ronda Rousey decides to attack on Saturday. And did we lose Chris?
Yep. I'm here. I think that Sarah Kaufman is a talented fighter, but if you're facing a girl that is that skilled at grappling and that trains with monsters in the 209, I don't see how it's going to go your way 10 out of 10 times.
And something else I heard actually probably on the same Rogan podcast that I mentioned earlier about Cerrone being able to throw those crazy head kicks because he can fight off his back. Something really interesting about Ronda Rousey, most fighters when they get to that spot of arm barring you, they just yank it in one direction and wait until you tap. Rousey's been training for so long, and she rolls every day with top level men too. So when she's down there, she's not only trying to yank on your arm, but she's constantly correcting. She knows which way you are going to try and roll out of the arm bar because she has so much experience with that move. She's it's once she has you in that spot, the fight's pretty much over because it's almost impossible to get out of.
Where have I heard
Rousey
this before?
Yanking the armbar.
Was this a Rogan podcast?
Yeah,
I think I've heard this on the Rogan podcast.
I just said I was quoting that from the Rogan podcast.
Shit. I missed that part.
Yeah, it was the same one, I think, where he was talking about Cerrone being able to throw those crazy kicks because he can fight off his back. But she corrects and is able to really put forth not one of the deadliest arm bars in women's MMA, but probably one of the most dangerous arm bars in MMA, period.
I agree with you 100%.
And we got about a half hour left before we sign off. You want to cover the news?
Yeah, let's do it.
Or actually, first let's talk more about women's MMA. I forgot I put a little note down. It's the second time a Strikeforce card, or the third time actually, because you had Chrono Cyborg, Rousey Tate, and now Rousey Kaufman. The third time a Strikeforce card has been headlined by a women's MMA fight. How long do you think it's going to be before we see a women's MMA division or two divisions? Because it would probably make more sense to bring in the 135 and 145 pound division, the two headlining divisions of women's MMA. How long do you think it's going to be until we see them in the UFC?
I'm not too sure that we'll ever see it. I don't think it has the mainstream appeal that everyone's making it out to be. I think for the hardcore fans, we can all appreciate it, but if you're talking about average, homes that are getting Fuel or FX or Fox, I just don't think you can sell it, man. I don't see it happening.
I actually see it happening within the next 2 or 3 years, and one thing that I point to probably more than anyone else is Dana White had a interview recently. I'll actually link it up on themmapodcast.com if anyone wants to go there. If they're listening to it a few days ahead of time, you should go back. It's August 15th. I'll post up the interview, and Dana White's actually talking about women's MMA and the UFC because he's fielded obviously a lot of questions about that in the last year or two, and he said that probably if there was going to be a women's MMA fight in the UFC, that Ronda Rousey would probably be the one headlining it. So maybe in a year or two, if we have a Rousey Cyborg fight. If we have a Tate-Rousey rematch, hopefully we'd see that in the UFC.
I would like to see it. Me personally, I'm all in for women's MMA.
And Cyborg actually recently has come out talking. I got a lump in my throat. Talking about Rousey. Rousey obviously has said some very inflammatory things about Cyborg. The main one of which saying "you have a dick, you dick," which a lot of people said was just kind of crossing the line because Cyborg's been kind of accused of using testosterone-like performance enhancers, but Cyborg recently coming out saying that she will not fight Ronda Rousey at 135 pounds. So that's the fight everyone wants to see in women's MMA. So it might have to be at 140-pound catch weight, Cyborg argues that, Rousey actually fought at 145 pounds her whole career until dropping down in her last fight against Miesha Tate, and she's, saying that Rousey's running from her and all that. But it sounds like both women want to fight each other, and we'll probably see that fight. I mean, when Cyborg gets unsuspended, I wouldn't be surprised if after Kaufman, both of these women's next fight were against each other.
Yes.
Yes. And, we've talked about women's MMA a bunch the last, 20 minutes. We got a bunch of news as well, fight announcements, people switching camps, mayhem, tearing up a church naked. So without any further ado, let's get into the news, man. I love how cheesy that thing is. God, that's so beautifully cheesy.
Never gets old.
It will never get old. If we ever make it to 100 podcasts, that news clip will be going strong, unless it's somebody's that I accidentally copyright infringe and they make me stop using it. But I'm pretty sure I didn't copyright infringe that. I try really hard to not do copyright infringement sort of things, except for that Van Halen song. But anyway, probably the top bit of news coming out this week is the 3 announcements for UFC on Fox 5. UFC on Fox 5, no one really knew who was going to headline that, but we now know that that's going to feature the lightweight championship between Ben Henderson and Nate Diaz, light heavyweight scrap between top light heavyweights Shogun Rua and Alex Gustafsson, and we have the rescheduled BJ Penn Rory McDonald fight that Rory recently had to back out of. I think it was first scheduled to be for UFC 152 in September, but Rory got a nasty cut above his eye that required almost 40 stitches, so he had to sit out a couple months. But, out of all of these cards, Bendo versus Nate Diaz, Shogun versus Gustafsson, Penn versus McDonald, which one intrigues you the most?
I'd probably have to say Shogun versus Gustafsson.
Definitely. I almost would say that. I think it's a close second to Ben Henderson versus Nate Diaz, though. That's going to be a barn burner, and we don't know what Nate Diaz we're going to see. We've almost seen 2 Nate Diaz's in the last couple years. The Nate Diaz that lost pretty handily decisions to Rory McDonald and Dong Young Kim, or the Nate Diaz that in his last 3 fights, armbarring Takanori Gomi, just putting it on Donald Cerrone, landing the most punches ever in a fight that went to a 3-round decision, and that fight against Jim Miller where he almost made Jim bite his own tongue off with that guillotine choke.
Oh man, that
was so nasty.
Miller's face was like that one animal. What's its name? Not a hamster. Was it a gerbil? Something like that. He looked like a gerbil.
Yeah, I've got a buddy, my friend Murphy, who looks just like Jim Miller, and I actually watched the fight with him. And this dude doesn't just kind of look like Jim Miller; he's like a Jim Miller doppelganger. And I almost felt bad for my friend Murphy watching Jim Miller just get. I mean, that was one of the nastiest submissions ever. Not because he was breaking any bones or anything, but you could just see that he was making Jim Miller bite down on his own tongue so hard that blood was starting to dribble out of his mouth. It was gross.
Yeah, that was grody.
That was grody. And Diaz, I think, was given the opportunity to fight one more time before a title shot, but he opted to wait for his title shot, which you can't blame him. Seeing all this BS that his brothers had to go through the last year, you can't blame him for waiting for a title shot. And that's exactly what he's going to do. UFC on Fox 5, December 8th, 2012. God, that's going to be a great card. 3 fights all announced this week that are going to be really great. And really quick, who do you have winning those 3 fights, man?
I've got Gustafsson winning his fight with Shogun. I've got what's the co-main? This memory of mine.
Penn McDonald.
There we go. I've got Penn and can't call the main event, man. I can't. I don't know. It's there's so many intangibles, man. It's the immovable force versus the other thing.
It's the one thing versus the other thing. Yeah, it's I definitely agree with you there. I think Benson Henderson versus Nate Diaz is probably going to be the closest match on there. If anything, I want to give it to Nate Diaz because you look at Ben Henderson. Yeah, since he lost that decision against Anthony Pettis, he has won 5 straight, but all 5 have been by a decision. And you look at Nate's last wins, and those 3 wins have been domination. Two common opponents that they fought in the last year or two, Jim Miller and Donald Cerrone. Benson Henderson had wars with Donald Cerrone, including the fight of the year in 2009, that probably one of the best fights of all time against Donald Cerrone, and the decision win against Jim Miller. I think those fights were a lot closer than those recent fights Nate Diaz has had. Benson Henderson didn't come close to putting the kind of hurt on Donald Cerrone that Nate Diaz did, and the same can probably go for the Miller fight. The Miller-Henderson fight was, pretty back and forth, but Henderson took that decision, and Nate Diaz gave Jim Miller no room to breathe in the second round, just leaping in with that guillotine choke. And I actually see there being a new lightweight champion in Nate Diaz. Shogun Rua, Alex Gustafsson. I see Rua winning just a war. Gustafsson is one of these guys who doesn't really like to get in wars. He would rather, punch a couple times and back away, kind of like a Dominic Cruz. But Shogun Rua won't let you do that. Every single fight Shogun's in, whether his opponent is willing or not, is an absolute war, and I think it's going to be the same story. He's going to turn that fight into a war, and if Rua Gustafsson gets turned into a war, I take Rua winning. BJ Penn, Rory McDonald. Rory's an up-and-comer. I think there's the definite chance of him being the future welterweight champion, but at this point, you have a guy in BJ Penn who has so much more experience than Rory McDonald. And another thing, you don't talk shit about BJ Penn before you fight him, or else you're going to have to fight an inspired BJ Penn. And I know it sounds like an excuse, as I'm an admitted BJ Penn fan, but an inspired BJ Penn is an animal, and that's going to be a great fight.
Unless your name's GSP.
Unless your name's GSP, and you can just rub Vaseline on your body and eliminate BJ Penn.
Oh, here we go.
But, UFC on Fox is going to be great. Actually, another fight that was announced, Chael Sonnen versus Forrest Griffin at UFC 155. We have it confirmed now that Chael Sonnen is going to be moving up to light heavyweight to take on Forrest Griffin, and that's going to be a great fight itself.
Yes, Chael versus Forrest, man. I think that Chael's got this in the bag. I don't really see Forrest being able to triangle Chael. I think Chael's turned a corner, and I know it's his 205 debut after spending a long time in middleweight, but I see Forrest at the tail end of his career, and I think Chael has a lot of mileage left and is definitely one of the stronger-minded fighters out there. So I've got Chael winning this probably by a finish.
Talking about guys being inspired, we just talked about inspired BJ Penn versus uninspired BJ Penn. Forrest Griffin has looked uninspired, to say the least, recently. They ask him, I think one of the biggest what the fuck moments I've ever seen is when Forrest Griffin was being interviewed before the Shogun Rua weigh-ins, and he was about to weigh in, and I don't know if he was just grumpy because he had just had to cut a bunch of weight. Forrest is obviously a bigger 205-pounder and needs to cut quite a bit to get there, but they asked him what he thought about his fight versus Shogun, and kind of half jokingly was like, I'm probably going to lose. I was like, what? Like, that is the opposite of what any fighter should even be, even allowing the possibility of that in your mind. And he went out there and did not look good against Shogun. He's 3-3 in his last 6 fights ever since taking the belt from Rampage Jackson. His 3 losses coming to really, really great fighters in Rashad Anderson and Mauricio Shogun Hua, and his 3 wins coming against guys who were starting to get a little bit older. He fought Tito Ortiz twice, beating him both times, once at UFC 106 and most recently at UFC 148 in Tito's retirement fight that a lot of people think Tito actually won.
He didn't win that fight. Let's get real.
He didn't win the fight, and afterwards ran out of the cage because he probably assumed he didn't win. And then he interviewed Ortiz, which apparently really angered Ortiz. Probably the least impressive thing of the entire ordeal was Ortiz crying about it at the post-fight presser, acting extremely the opposite of a way a historic fighter, a legendary fighter like him should be going out. Instead of going out as a respected guy, he went out crying about a decision. And he won a fight against Rich Franklin where he not only is much younger than Rich Franklin, but he's much bigger than Rich Franklin. So I think most people saw that going that way. And
that was such a boring fight, too.
Yeah.
That was the worst fight on the main card.
You have a guy who I would argue he and Rampage are probably the most uninspired fighters in the UFC now. It seems like they don't really care too much about what's going on, and Sonnen, I'd argue, is one of the most inspired guys in the UFC. He puts his shield out there, and like Tito would say, and gives it his all. So when it comes down to it, I think Forrest has a little bit better striking. Forrest has those head kicks that he used during his championship run. But you have an uninspired guy against an inspired guy, and we all know how that one ends.
This is a gimme fight for Chael. He has to come over, to 205 from 185. I mean, you can throw him to the wolves, but I guess Joe Silva has decided we're going to really see where he stands against Forrest Griffin, and we're going to go ahead and see it whenever it happens, and I'm looking forward to it, man. I think either way, it doesn't matter who's inspired or who's not. When they lock that cage door, it's going to come down to who wants it more, and I think Chael definitely does.
This is going to be a great litmus test for Sonnen, and if he can go out there and impressively beat Forrest Griffin, then he's maybe one more fight away from a title shot. Maybe you put him up versus a guy, have him fight the winner of Shogun Gustafsson. Maybe have him fight a guy like I was gonna say Henderson, but we all don't really know what's gonna happen there. I would love to see the winner of this fight take on the winner of Hua Gustafsson, and the winner of that get a crack against Jon Jones. And speaking of Jon Jones and Chael Sonnen, actually just the last couple days, which you got to give Chael Sonnen so much credit. It's only about a month and a week since his July 7th match against Anderson Silva, and in beautiful Chael fashion, he already has a shit-talking match going with another UFC champion, talking with Jon Jones, saying, Jones and Henderson have been mixing up the trash talk a little bit recently, like I mentioned earlier. Jones calling Henderson a one-trick pony, Henderson saying that, it's a good trick. And Jones actually, Sonnen said that he wants to clean up what's left of Jones after Hendo gets done with him, which beautiful line. And Jones replies back to Sonnen pretty quickly on Twitter, "I'm more man than you'll ever be," which, come on, that's not even a original quote. That's probably been used by 100,000 people, and I guess he's referring to his TE ratio and his TRT treatment. And you know what? That's been declared legal by the Athletic Commission, so it's not really Jon Jones' spot to question that. But yeah, it's really interesting seeing just over a month after Sonnen and Silva in their dispute, he's starting it back up with another UFC champion in Jones.
I think John and Dan have a lot of respect for each other. They know what's on the line, and this isn't Hendo's first rodeo, and John tries to remain respectful while trying not to sound too pious, but it's just one of those things where Chael is in his bracket now. Chael is coming up to 205. Jones is the champ, and Chael is the best shit talker in MMA, in my opinion. So,
in MMA history.
Yeah, I love to see the guy go out there and say some of the most interesting and funny things ever. And Jon actually had something to say. It's pretty funny. Like the guy went in there and basically got into a Twitter feud with Hendo and Chael, and he basically said about Chael, which was retweeted by Front Row Brian, that I'll surmise it. Basically, he said that if you think I don't know what I'm getting into, you're out of your mind. I know what the game is. So Jon is very well aware of it, and if he knows what's good for him, he won't get into a firefight verbally with Chael Sonnen.
Just Dewey it. Get it?
Yeah.
Because he just signed with Nike. Just do it. DUI.
It's like Brandon verified.
Right. He is verified on Twitter for sure. Speaking of Anderson, actually, he's not going to fight until 2013, which I think is more of a strategical move, and I think he definitely deserves it after ending that rivalry with Sonnen. So, with an exclamation point. And if anything, I don't think it's because he actually needs a break. I think this is more of a strategic thing. There's not really anything at middleweight that he likes. His camps come out and said that they don't want to fight against Weidman. They don't think Boach deserves it. They don't think Belcher deserves it. And they've kind of poo-pooed any sort of fight at middleweight. And the only fights they've said they're interested in are fights against Nick Diaz, who the UFC shot that idea down, and a fight against GSP. So Anderson wants GSP next, and the UFC has definitely made it clear that if George St. Pierre is able to defeat Carlos Condit in November, that's a definite possibility. So I think Anderson's putting himself on the shelf until the next GSP fight so he can get St. Pierre next.
I'm sorry, but I have to bring this up before I comment on that. I was on Twitter looking up the back and forth, and I think you should hear this. John Bones said that Chael should earn his title shot instead of talking himself into one, and then he can hurt him. So Chael Sonnen's response was, "Oh, I plan to. By the way, how long did it take your parents to come up with your name, Jon Jones? #creative."
Wow. Wow, I'm looking at this now. Boarding plane to Oregon now. Home of your corporate wage masters. Next time you're in town, knock on my door. Don't drive. At Johnny Bones. Wow, that is incredible. And he said, advice to Johnny Bones. Take some of that Nike money, hire new riders. God, Sonnen is an absolute master.
He's the best in the business, bar none.
And that'll, I think Chael is going to win this fight against Forrest. If he gets another fight against, say, a Shogun Rua, that would be a barn burner of a fight. And if he gets through that, then we will see what happens after that. It'll be great to see Chael move up and try and grab another title. Got about 8 minutes left, so we'll try and hit the last few news topics we got. Mayhem Miller goes absolutely berserk in a church, breaks in apparently, smashes CDs and pictures and a bunch of other stuff, and sprays fire extinguisher everywhere, and the cops show up, and apparently Mayhem was totally coherent, not fucked up, not in a rage or anything, but he was just chilling out in a couch on the second floor of the church, absolutely butt naked, just hanging.
It's a cry for help, man. I mean, if he's not still going batshit crazy when the cops get there, I'm pretty sure it was foresight on Mayhem's part. He planned to do it. Who knows what his motives are? Or on the flip side of that coin, he is actually batshit crazy.
Yeah, the Twitter account MMA Roasted. I don't know if any of you follow that, but it's a great Twitter, and he was posting up a lot of really funny stuff. Let me try and see. He said, after this incident, Mayhem has officially won the Coaches Challenge. Mayhem Miller just took the term lay and pray to a whole new level. Friday, Roy Nilsson got naked and broke into an Arby's, but nobody said anything. Steven Seagal said he taught Mayhem how to break into a church and get naked. Cecil Peoples scored the incident 10-9 for the church. So, yeah, the interesting thing about that is C.R. Bahurazada actually responded back to him and was very angry and was saying, "You don't know what's going on. This is serious. This isn't something to joke about." So I'm hoping it's more of a PR stunt than anything that serious. But yeah, we'll see exactly what happens as Chris sends me a barrage of Skype messages. I think we're at like 10 now. But that was definitely one of the more weird stories coming out of MMA recently. We had Nick Lentz also moving from ATT to MMMMAAAAA, Minnesota Mixed Martial Arts Academy.
It's the other way around, by the way.
Oh, okay. Sorry. He moved. Yeah. He. I read that incorrectly, but it'll be interesting to see Lentz move on, and he's one of these guys who he's started off a little bit slow, but he's proved he's a dynamo at his weight class.
Nick was on a big time roll at lightweight, and he got dominated, and he got dominated by Evan Dunham and Charles Oliveira. I'm not sure what weight class he's at. Is he at lightweight or featherweight?
He, I believe, is at featherweight.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was just a little undersized for the division. He did well. A lot of people said he was one of the most boring fighters, the John Fitch of lightweight, but then he started fighting guys who really would actually make a war of it, that weren't mismatches, and now he's getting a little more exciting. I think he could get nothing better than going to ATT in Florida and training with those animals instead of being comfortable at Minnesota Mixed Martial Arts Academy.
Yep, I'm looking now. Actually, he had lost his last 2 fights at lightweight, and this past Saturday was his featherweight debut. So he's 1-0 now at featherweight, and hasn't been announced who he's going to fight next. But he controlled the entire fight. Finished Mitsoka in the first round. Looked very, very good. So I guess without any further ado, Chris, what did you learn today?
I learned today that Jon Anik is lactose intolerant, and I'm an asshole.
Oh, you took mine. I learned that when you asked him about his tan, he said he was going to the pool. He had just gotten back from the pool, but he hinted that he gets a little bit of makeup applied. So I guess I learned that we can't be 100% sure if that tan is real, but he obviously works on it, spending some quality pool time. And huge thanks to Jon Anik for hopping on and being part of the podcast.
Yeah, and we gone.
And, without any further ado, like I said earlier, we're not going to be around, unfortunately, next week. But we will be back in 2 weeks on the 29th with our 11th episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Shout out to Jon Anik, like we just said, for coming on the podcast, being a part of this episode. And the biggest thanks to everyone who listens. You all keep the gears turning and keep the wheels rolling. Visit MMAmental.com, themmmaplayground.com. Obviously, visit us at themmapodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter on the MMA Podcast. And we gone.
I live my life like this. No love.